In the heart of the untamed American Southwest, a tribe emerged whose name would be etched into history, their very presence evoking a sense of both admiration and fear. This tribe was the Apache, a people known for their extraordinary resilience, warrior ethos, and deep connection to the rugged lands they called home. While often remembered for their fierce reputation in battle, the story of the Apache is far more complex, steeped in rich traditions, a deep love for freedom, and a tragic history shaped by the injustices of colonization. The Apache, a nomadic people, roamed the vast desert landscapes of what is now Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Texas and northern Mexico. These lands, harsh and unforgiving, required not only physical strength, but also ingenuity and a profound understanding of nature to survive. The Apache mastered these challenges, using the land's resources to their advantage and developing tactics that made them one of the most formidable forces in the Southwest. Their raids were swift and precise, their knowledge of the terrain unparalleled, and their warriors feared across the region. For centuries, the Apache clashed with other indigenous nations, engaging in raids and battles as they sought to defend their territory and assert their dominance. These conflicts, combined with their striking guerrilla tactics, contributed to their reputation as fierce and ruthless fighters. Stories of Apache warriors attacking settlements, burning crops, and taking captives spread quickly, painting a picture of a people defined by cruelty and destruction. The Apache were known to scalp their enemies, a practice that became symbolic of their raids and was used to instill fear in those who opposed them. Men, women, and children fell victim to these attacks, with the Apache showing little mercy as they defended their way of life. However, to reduce the Apache to mere raiders and warriors is to miss the depth of their story. While they were undeniably skilled in warfare, the Apache were also deeply spiritual, with a culture rich in traditions, ceremonies, and a reverence for the land. They believed in the power of the natural world, and their spiritual practices were closely tied to the earth, the sky, and the elements. The Apache's connection to the land was not just one of survival, but of sacred responsibility. Their worldview was centered on maintaining balance with nature, a balance that was threatened by the arrival of European settlers. The 16th century marked the beginning of a new and tragic chapter for the Apache people. The arrival of Spanish explorers and missionaries brought not only new technologies and horses, but also diseases that devastated indigenous populations. Smallpox and other European diseases ravaged Apache communities, killing countless people and weakening their defenses. Yet the Apache refused to submit. They adapted to the changing landscape, incorporating horses into their raids and becoming even more mobile, striking fear into the hearts of Spanish colonists. The Spanish, in turn, viewed the Apache as a constant threat to their settlements and missions. For decades, the two sides engaged in a bitter struggle for control of the region, with neither able to claim a decisive victory. This period of conflict would set the stage for the Apache's later confrontations with the United States, as both European settlers and the U.S. government expanded westward, encroaching on Apache lands. By the 19th century, the expansion of the United States into the Southwest led to a new and even more brutal phase of conflict for the Apache. As settlers pushed westward, they came into direct contact with Apache territory, sparking violent clashes. The U.S. government, determined to secure the region for American settlers, launched military campaigns to subdue the Apache and other indigenous nations. These campaigns were marked by extreme violence, as both sides fought desperately to defend their way of life. One of the most famous figures to emerge during this period of conflict was Geronimo, an Apache leader whose name would become synonymous with resistance. Geronimo, born in 1829, witnessed firsthand the atrocities committed against his people by both Mexican and U.S. forces. His family was killed during a raid by Mexican soldiers, an event that fueled his desire for revenge and set him on a path of relentless resistance. For years, Geronimo led a small band of warriors in a series of daring raids against both Mexican and American targets, using the rugged terrain of the Southwest to evade capture. Geronimo's ability to outmaneuver and outfight larger, better-equipped military forces made him a legend. However, by the late 1800s, the U.S. Army's technological advancements and relentless pursuit began to take their toll. In 1886, Geronimo finally surrendered to U.S. forces, marking the end of the Apache's armed resistance. With his surrender, the Apache were forced onto reservations, their once nomadic lifestyle replaced by the harsh reality of life under government control. The reservation system was a devastating blow to the Apache people. Stripped of their land, their freedom, and their ability to hunt and gather, they were left dependent on government rations that were often insufficient. The once proud Apache warriors, who had roamed freely across the Southwest, were now confined to small plots of land, their culture and way of life systematically dismantled by U.S. policies of assimilation. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming adversity, the Apache spirit remained unbroken. They continued to practice their traditions in secret, passing down their language, stories, and customs to future generations. Over time, the Apache, like many other Native American nations, found ways to preserve their identity despite the efforts of the U.S. government to erase it. The history of the Apache people is a tragic tale, but it is also a story of resilience, strength, and survival. The Apache endured centuries of conflict, displacement, and attempts at cultural eradication, yet they never lost their connection to their land or their identity. Today, the Apache people continue to thrive, their culture and history serving as a testament to their unwavering spirit. The Apache, like many other indigenous groups, endured a long history of displacement, violence, and the theft of their ancestral lands and resources. As settlers pushed westward, the Apache found themselves subjected to a series of injustices, including forced relocation, military campaigns aimed at their destruction, and the decimation of their vital buffalo herds. Despite this, their rich cultural heritage, everyday existence, and profound religious convictions remain a testament to their resilience and lasting impact on the American Southwest. In this episode, we won't just focus on the legendary figures like Geronimo, who became synonymous with Apache resistance. We'll dive deeper into the lives of the Apache people as a whole. From their nomadic lifestyle to their spiritual beliefs, the Apache story is one of survival against overwhelming odds. Before we embark on this fascinating journey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to join this amazing community dedicated to exploring untold histories. The term Apache is widely recognized in U.S. history, often made famous by Hollywood westerns, but the reality of the Apache people goes far beyond what the movies portray. The word Apache itself has an interesting origin, derived from the Zuni word Apache, which means enemy in Spanish. However, the Apache refer to themselves as Ind or Deen, meaning the people. This simple, yet profound self-designation speaks volumes about how the Apache viewed their place in the world, connected to the land and each other. The Apache are not a singular tribe, but rather a collection of different groups with their own unique identities. These tribes include the Chiricahua, Chokanan, Western Apache, Kiowa, Mescalero, and Lipan, each with its own traditions and customs. Over time, the names of these tribes were changed from their original local names and only became widely used after European settlers arrived. The Apache's history is a complex one, with each band having its own story of survival and adaptation. Interestingly, some view the Navajo as distant relatives of the Apache, though this is a topic of debate among scholars. The lack of a precise definition for the term Apache has led to varying opinions about which groups fall under this label. In prehistoric times, the ancestors of the Apache tribes lived in a very different environment than the deserts and plains we often associate with them today. Anthropological evidence suggests that the Apache originally inhabited the northern plains, far from the Southwest, where they are most commonly known to have lived. Between the 13th and 15th centuries, the Apache migrated from the northwest Pacific coast to the southwestern United States. As they moved eastward, they bypassed the canyon lands and instead settled in the southern plains of Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. This migration marked a significant transformation in the Apache way of life. The Apache were a nomadic people, relying heavily on hunting and gathering for survival. They did not establish permanent settlements, but instead followed the seasonal movements of the animals they hunted, particularly the buffalo. The buffalo was central to the Apache way of life, providing them with food, clothing, tools, and shelter. Every part of the buffalo was used, and the Apache believed that the animal spirit was a gift from the Creator, ensuring their survival. As they settled in the southern plains, the Apache developed a close relationship with the land. Their nomadic lifestyle allowed them to adapt quickly to their environment, moving from one area to another as resources became available or scarce. They lived in small, mobile bands, each led by a chief who was chosen based on wisdom, bravery, and leadership skills. The Apache were expert horsemen, using horses, introduced to them by the Spanish, to hunt more efficiently and to engage in raids against rival tribes and later, European settlers. The horse became a symbol of power and freedom, allowing the Apache to cover vast distances and maintain their independence. However, life on the plains was not without its challenges. The Apache were constantly at odds with neighboring tribes such as the Comanche and the Ute, who also competed for resources and territory. These intertribal conflicts were fierce, with each group fighting to protect its land and way of life. The Apache developed sophisticated tactics for raiding and warfare, using the land's natural features to their advantage. Their intimate knowledge of the rugged terrain made them formidable opponents in battle, and their guerrilla-style tactics would later frustrate U.S. military forces during their attempts to subdue the Apache in the late 19th century. Religious convictions played a vital role in Apache society, guiding not only their daily lives, but also their actions in war and peace. The Apache believed in a spiritual world that was deeply connected to the land and all living things. They honored the spirits of the animals they hunted, the earth that sustained them, and the sky that watched over them. Apache shamans, or medicine men, were revered for their knowledge of the spiritual and natural world. These spiritual leaders performed ceremonies to ensure successful hunts, heal the sick, and protect their people in times of conflict. The Apache also practiced ceremonies such as the sunrise dance, a coming-of-age ritual for young girls, which remains an important cultural tradition today. Despite their resilience and resourcefulness, the Apache, like many other indigenous groups, were ultimately overwhelmed by the technological and military might of European settlers and later, the U.S. government. As settlers moved westward, encroaching on Apache territory, the U.S. military launched campaigns aimed at forcing the Apache onto reservations. These campaigns were brutal, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Apache, who had relied on their nomadic lifestyle and intimate knowledge of the land for survival, found themselves trapped in a losing battle against an enemy with superior firepower and resources. One of the most famous figures in this struggle was Geronimo, a leader of the Chiricahua Apache. Geronimo became a symbol of resistance, leading a small band of warriors in a series of daring raids against both Mexican and American forces. His ability to evade capture and his fierce determination made him a legend, but his resistance could not last forever. In 1886, after years of fighting, Geronimo surrendered to U.S. forces, marking the end of the Apache's armed resistance. The Apache were forced onto reservations, their nomadic way of life replaced by confinement and dependence on government rations. Yet, even in defeat, the Apache's spirit endured. Today, many Apache tribes continue to preserve their language, traditions, and culture. While their numbers have dwindled, the Apache people remain a testament to the resilience of indigenous communities in the face of adversity. As we explore the fascinating history of the Apache, it's clear that their story is far more than one of warfare and displacement. It's a story of survival, adaptation, and the unbreakable bond between a people and their land. The Apache's legacy lives on in the American Southwest, where their descendants continue to honor their ancestors and the rich cultural heritage they have inherited. The Apache were resourceful people, deeply connected to the natural world, particularly the buffalo, which was central to their way of life. Buffalo meat was a primary source of food, rich in nutrients and essential for their survival on the harsh plains. The Apache used every part of the buffalo, crafting clothing from its hides and using the thick skins to make tents that provided warmth and shelter against the elements. Their traditional attire, often made from buckskin and buffalo hides, included moccasins, leggings, and tunics, all of which were decorated with intricate beadwork and feathers. These decorations not only added beauty, but also held cultural significance, symbolizing status, accomplishments, and spiritual beliefs. Though buffalo meat was the main component of their diet, the Apache also foraged for berries and edible plants during their nomadic journeys, supplementing their meals with what nature provided. However, they refrained from eating fish or bear meat, as these animals were considered impure in their culture. This spiritual view of food reflects the Apache's broader worldview, where the natural world was imbued with meaning and respect. The rules around food were part of a larger ethical and spiritual system that guided their interactions with the world around them. The Apache were organized into extended family units, known as bands, each led by the most influential member, who served as a chief advisor. This leader was responsible for the well-being of the group, ensuring that everyone was provided for and that decisions were made for the greater good. These family units often lived near one another, coming together for larger social, religious, and military purposes. When facing outside threats or preparing for ceremonies, multiple family bands would unite, showing their strength in numbers and shared purpose. While leadership roles within Apache bands were typically reserved for men, women held significant positions within their society. Apache society followed a matrilineal structure, meaning that lineage and inheritance were traced through the mother's side of the family. After marriage, a man would join his wife's family, living and working alongside her relatives. This practice reinforced the importance of women in maintaining family and social bonds. In cases where a wife passed away, it was not uncommon for the husband to remarry her sister or cousin, keeping the family unit intact and underscoring the value of kinship ties in Apache culture. Apache culture was rich with traditions and celebrations, many of which were marked by dances that held both social and spiritual significance. One of the most important of these was the sunrise dance, a ceremony that symbolized a girl's transition into womanhood. This event was not only a rite of passage, but also a time to seek blessings for her future, ensuring health, fertility, and prosperity. The Dance of the Mountain Spirit was another key tradition, where participants wore masks to represent the powerful mountain spirits. These dances were more than mere entertainment. They were sacred rituals that connected the Apache to their ancestors, their land, and the spiritual forces that guided their lives. The Apache were not entirely isolated from other groups. They maintained peaceful relationships with neighboring tribes, engaging in trade that benefited both sides. They traded agricultural products and pottery with other tribes in exchange for buffalo meat and hides, creating an economic network that helped sustain their nomadic lifestyle. These exchanges also fostered cultural interactions, allowing the Apache to share ideas and goods while maintaining their distinct identity. Overall, the Apache were a complex and highly organized society with deep spiritual connections to the land and the animals that sustained them. Their traditions, leadership structures, and economic exchanges demonstrate their adaptability and resilience in the face of both natural challenges and external threats. Despite the hardships they endured over the centuries, the Apache people preserved their way of life, their culture, and their spirit. Today, their legacy continues to shape the American Southwest, and their stories serve as a powerful reminder of the strength and endurance of indigenous communities. The mutually beneficial relationship between the Apache and neighboring communities allowed the Apache to focus on buffalo hunting while fostering peaceful relations with other tribes. This arrangement was critical for their survival and prosperity, as it enabled the Apache to thrive in a challenging environment. However, everything changed when the Spaniards arrived in the territory inhabited by both the Apache and Pueblo peoples. The Spanish disrupted the established trade networks between the Pueblo peoples and the Apaches, creating conflict and instability in the region. The arrival of the Spanish not only affected the Apaches' access to resources, but also disturbed the balance of power between indigenous groups. For the Apache, these disruptions went beyond material resources. They struck at the heart of their deeply spiritual connection to the land and their strict adherence to laws and customs. The Apache held their way of life as sacred, with strict and solemn rules governing every aspect of their existence, from celebrations to warfare. These laws, rooted in their reverence for nature and the interconnectedness of life, were followed meticulously and without exception. The Apache believed that their customs and rules were given to them by the Creator and were essential for maintaining balance and harmony within their community. In Apache society, disputes were taken very seriously and were handled with a great deal of care and respect for justice. If a conflict could not be resolved privately, it had to be brought to the attention of the chieftain. The chieftain, often with the help of 2 or 3 other leaders, would conduct a thorough investigation or trial to assess the accused's guilt. Unlike European courts, there was no need for witnesses to swear an oath. Trust within the community was paramount. The Apache believed that no one would provide false testimony about matters affecting their own people, as doing so would disrupt the harmony and trust that held their society together.